Welcome on in to the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here with Eric Frandsen on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM, The Fan.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, happy Friday. This has been kind of a long week. There's been a lot happening, lot to go over. We had an interview with Ben Jacobson earlier. We've actually got more interviews with coaches lined up down the line. We should be talking to Manny Martins next week. Of course, there's a big Saturday coming up, but I don't know. We're talking about this week, but of course, a lot of it's just been behind the scenes, just working on a bunch of different smaller projects, keeping the show going. So it's been a week.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on. We got portal stuff, portal combat.
That's
continues.
That's probably been the biggest thing. Is
new
just,
head coach,
just trying to get through all the portal stuff,
trying to figure out how he coaches, who fits into his systems normally. So yeah, still a lot to get through. The portal will remain open for another week. So for Utah State, Aggies are at this point where it's like there's no more wondering who may enter the portal for Utah State. But if there are any other players who were on last year's roster who might decide to stay, there's still some question to that. But it's all about how does this team build its roster. And there's some news on that officially today. We'll get into that too.
Yeah, so there's updates with both men's and women's basketball. More players that have publicly recommitted or more just officially announced. So usually it's coming through Utah State social media accounts. So usually the athletes are then following up with some of their own reports. But yeah, an official signing today from the transfer portal, though it was something that was reported yesterday. We talked about it a lot yesterday. We can follow up with some other thoughts, but we went over it a lot more yesterday. But with women's basketball, also another signing. Of course, at this point, anyone who hasn't entered the portal, I've kind of been assuming are going to be staying. They've updated their roster page for 2026-27 and have players on that list. Not that list can't change, but I'm kind of assuming that everyone's on that list is going to be staying. And I think they're up to 9 players on that list. Granted, I think 2 of them are incoming players. Well, I'm not 100% sure they have Nicole Ogun on next year's roster, but if they don't, they should. She's incoming from Finland. So, yeah, they've got 7 players from last year's roster who are on next year's roster on their website, which if they're updating it this early, they're pretty confident. Usually they take a while to update that.
Yeah. But
it's up there. But they've officially announced now 5 players as having re-signed. Bella Cosme, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, Aaliyah Gales, and Eric, I'm going to make you say these here. Do you have my transfer tracker in front of you?
No. Okay, I don't have your article in front of me.
Okay, since you don't, I've
got your Google sheet, but not.
Well, that doesn't have the women's basketball. That's a
yes.
Pac-12 specific one.
Yes.
I have a page specifically dedicated to Utah State. It's not on a Google sheet. But Paloma Munoz Ferreros and Aitana Rosello Lopez. Those are 2 other players. Both players who played limited roles last year, but they're both freshmen. They're both promising. I really liked watching both of those players in their, in the minutes they were able to get, and they were able to get a few more later in the season. But I believe it was earlier today or last night, Utah State officially announcing that Macy Brown.
That was earlier today.
Yeah, she'll be returning. I was kind of assuming that already, just because of the way things have been updated on Utah State's end. But yeah, Macy Brown, who had a solid, contributing presence last year, not a ton scoring wise, averaged 2 points per game, but she averaged dang near 3 rebounds per game. She got more rebounds than points. So she was a steadying presence out there on the court as well, and continuing to develop. So it's nice to see, especially someone with local ties, went to Ridgeline High School. So being able to retain her,
and her dad is an alum.
Yeah,
and he's a famous Aggie player.
Yeah, always good to have those local.
Yeah,
connections.
Great to have those connections, and these are really good wins for Wes Brooks and his coaching staff. He has a lot to rebuild because last year there was a lot of hope and excitement and expectation, and it didn't happen. And we've talked about it, a lot of different extenuating circumstances that made it tough for Utah State women to really gain traction and build much last year. But despite all of that, what he's been able to do to retain as many players as he's had, that speaks volumes to, even though they weren't winning on the court, they were believing in what he was trying to teach them and trying to develop. So this is really big news, I think, for Utah State women's basketball. How many players they've been able to retain and keep on their roster, and that they won't have to expend so much energy trying to fill a roster and plug gaps like what Coach Ben Jacobson's having to do for men's basketball. This Wes Brooks led team for Utah State women, they can be just a few more steps ahead. Players who come back understand what's asked of them, what they're trying to accomplish, just keep everybody healthy, and they could have a nice little run in going as they move into the Pac-12.
Yeah, and for women's basketball being able to retain this number of players, I got distracted. I'm hoping you were still talking about women's basketball.
Yep. Yes, I
suddenly wasn't sure if you transitioned to men's basketball.
Not yet.
But I got distracted and suddenly wasn't listening to Eric, which isn't always a great thing.
That never happens.
It never happens. I never stop listening to Eric. But I was looking this up because Carson Frost was reporting this with the Herald Journal. I should offer public congratulations there, going from the Utah Statesman to the Herald Journal. But he reported this, saying that if we look at all the players on the official roster page that are still on there, and assuming all of them are coming back, it's the most players this program has retained since the 2020-2021 season. When you look at the last,
that's amazing.
Again, you look at all these years since, like, it has been just a rotating door of 13, 14 newcomers per year. Like, maybe you keep one. Even last year, they kept, I think, 3 players. I think it was Elise Livingston, Sophie Sen, and Jamison Heaton. There might have been one other, but I think that was mostly it. It was 3 or 4. Now it's like 7.
Yeah.
So, and I know that again, that may not seem a lot based on what it used to be, where you used to keep like 9 or 10, but these days.
But in the modern era of unlimited free agency with college athletes, this is a big deal, and these players had ample reason to justify a move. Like, look, I'm with this team. They didn't win very much last year. I'm going to go try to find a new place where maybe and hopefully I could win more games. But what this says is they recognize we had some challenges last year. We don't think those are going to be the same challenges next year. We believe in what's being built, and we want to be a part of it. Yeah. So I think it's big news. It's a great win for Wes Brooks and the women's basketball team.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on some of the players they have coming in. They've got a lot of plans of players they're looking at bringing in. I know Dalton Forsyth was teasing that on social media. But given what Wes Brooks was able to do, some of the caliber of players he was able to bring in, like, again, promising freshman recruits, really solid Division I transfers, I'm anticipating some pretty solid signings. It's not going to be like out of the world. He's not going to sign like a 5-star recruit, but he'll be signing some solid, I think, some solid players with a lot of good potential.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. He's got some international experience now. Will he lean more on that to fill some of these other holes, or will they just be new to college basketball in the States, or will there be some transfers, players who have had some experience and they can build on that and continue to grow here at USU as they try to build something, because it's been the struggle. USU basketball, women's basketball, has struggled for a long time trying to get its footing. And they just always seem like they're slipping in the mud. They just never quite get that traction that they need. And having this that many players stay despite the record that they had, I think that signals a lot about the coaching that's going on and the character building that's going on, that they're willing to give it another shot.
Yeah, and the belief, because every year as we've prepared for the season, the players are saying, I'm bought in. Look, we know what the history of the program is, but we're bought in. We're going to have a good year. And then year after year, they'd go 4-25. And then every one of those players who's talking about believing in the rebuild dipped. They're gone. But now they're sticking around because I think that they see the vision. They know it didn't go well last year. But I think this year they understand that, hey, it wasn't really anybody's fault that the team struggled. It was a lot of bad luck combined with the fact that they were still a relatively new group to each other, so they have room to grow. So they don't get down on themselves and they also see the vision going forward. So those are things that I really like for Utah State women's basketball going into the future, especially this next year.
Yeah, yeah.
So
and with that, they'll have there are players here those that are recommitting who didn't play really large roles. They're going to have opportunities to play larger roles, and that may be part of their reason of staying is they recognize that they're going to have greater opportunity to get some things rolling for Utah State.
Yeah. A lot of these players should be able to step up this upcoming year. Looking at men's basketball now. Now, the official news that came out earlier today was the official signing of Will Hornseth. Finally came on his visit to Utah State, so they were able to get all the promotional, the pictures of him in an Aggie jersey, and they don't have to Photoshop that or anything like that. So they officially have signed former Northern Iowa forward Will Hornseth. Yesterday we talked a lot about whether or not he would fit next to Carson Templin. That's going to be something we're going to have to figure out, going forward, because he's on the roster now. Him and Carson are going to.
It's there.
Yeah.
And I think that the comps are. We talked a lot about how this may be just another Carson Templin, but he may be more in the Gary Clark mold, but they're still
I don't know.
very similar in how they play and how they approach the game.
Yeah, there's some similarities that I really see there. Like, I was watching a lot more Will Hornseth film today, looking at some of his tendencies, and I honestly think that Will Hornseth, one of the, I wouldn't say this is the greatest because it's oversimplifying too many things, but I almost look at Will Hornseth as like Carson Templin, but with a bit more of a post game. Because that's one way that Will Hornseth has scored a lot, is he's actually a pretty decent post player. And
he doesn't really prowl the perimeter very much. He's more of a in the paint kind of a guy. But how they approach the game, there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah, there's similarities. They're both guys that can get rebounds, but they're not necessarily like elite, rebound, vacuums, the way that some players can potentially be. But they're good at boxing out. They'll go get a rebound when they need to. Will Hornseth didn't get a whole lot of offensive rebounds, at least a ton, but that was mostly like team emphasis. Northern Iowa just doesn't prioritize getting offensive rebounds. And so honestly, I think you'll see Carson Templin's offensive rebounding numbers drop this next year, but they're both solid players for their role. They're kind of undersized centers, and they have similarities in how they can score. Again, Carson doesn't have much of a back to the basket game, but in other ways, cut into the basket. They both have a nice little in the paint floater, like that 5 or 6 foot, just floated up toward the rim. Carson's added that to his game. It's a big part of Will Hornseth's game. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to see them in a similar fashion. But while I know some people will often say like, hey, these two players are really similar, so should they be in the starting lineup together, or should they be in the lineup together? And I don't always see redundancies between players as a bad thing. Like, why would you not want two players who do good things? Maybe they're the same two good things, but why would you not want them on the court if they can do those things?
Yeah, if you had 2 6'7" wings who can shoot the leather off the ball, would you not want both of them on the court at the same time?
It's like they do the same thing, but it's things you need in spades. And mind you, there are things that can be a little worrisome if they're redundant. If you're both back to the basket, post scores, like there are sometimes some traits that are harder to have, they're harder to deal with if you have redundancies. If you have 2 incredibly ball dominant guards, sometimes it can kind of, cut into the effectiveness of either player. But even then, it's not particularly bad. But to me, the fact that there are similarities between Will Hornseth and Carson Templin aren't the issue. The only issue for me is can they both form a front court defensively? That is the one concern for me with them is can they both be on the court and be a viable defensive power forward center duo? Right.
Can they move somebody off their spot? Can they have enough strength or force to move an opponent who loves to live in the paint? Can they move him out of where he wants to be?
Yeah.
Can they make life uncomfortable for someone who might be bigger than them, or at least taller than them, or more lengthy? Can they still have an impact defensively? I'm not worried about them offensively being on the court at the same time.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
I think the bigger question is, can these two handle what's necessary against a bigger foe?
Yeah, well, I think just as worrisome as can they handle a smaller opponent, more particularly at power forward. Say that somebody's running a lineup with a 6'5" guard, essentially, running a power forward. Can they handle that matchup defensively?
Yeah.
Because if they can,
in front of them.
yeah, if they can, then that's great. And of course, being able to deal with these matchup issues, it's basically about mitigating the advantages. Like the advantage of small ball is to be faster and to be able to, run around your opponents. But the downside is maybe you can't rebound as well. You get dominated in the post. And so Carson Templin and Will Hornseth need to be able to mitigate the potential advantages for other teams by running smaller lineups, by being able to defend them. And then on offense, Will Hornseth is fantastic against, watching some of his post-ups. Some players will weirdly struggle when they're trying to take advantage of a mismatch. They'll get the ball stripped out of their hands by guards who are trying to, they're fighting for their lives down there, but they manage to get a steal, swiping the ball away. Will Hornseth, in the post-ups I've seen, he eats mismatches alive. And so that's something the Aggies could take advantage of if they're able to keep those two on the court defensively. They'll live on offense. They'll feast on offense. So that's something to keep an eye on there.
One other thing about Utah State men's basketball, I don't know if you saw this. They've announced a new T-shirt campaign.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really a T-shirt campaign. Looks like it's a political campaign. Help fill the mayor's cabinet. Donate to the mayor's campaign and get a free campaign T-shirt.
They could have done a lot better with the T-shirts I've seen. Why isn't there a Mason Falslev the campaign silhouette or whatever, where Mason's giving the wave to the crowd or something like that? Get one of those again. I don't know what the name, but you imagine just that silhouette of Mason or that kind of grainy, again style where he's make it an Aggie blue and in the white and just have that, and then Falslev,
like they're running for office.
Yeah,
Falslev
running for office.
Templin.
Falslev Templin. They could have done some really fun stuff with that.
Yeah, this doesn't really look like this is a political logo that they created, even though the messaging is kind of tongue in cheek that way.
They're doing that.
It's an outline of the state of Utah. There's a star over where Cache Valley would be. It says 2026 true-blooded Aggie, and then Falslev plus Templin.
Yeah,
at the bottom. It's cheeky. It's kind of fun. Whatever. And T-shirts, you're any from $35 to $60, and you get a T-shirt depending on what color and all that stuff. And this is just a way for fans to donate to these guys to keep them around and thank them for sticking around, and you get a T-shirt as part of the deal.
Yeah. So yeah, go buy a bunch of T-shirts if you're inclined to. Should we each get one?
Wear it on the show.
I'll end up on the donor list again somehow.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but it's officially through Utah State. So it's this is one of the things where they have opportunities to run basically fundraising and NIL opportunities through the university now, and this helps with the recruitment and retention of some of these players.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We're pretty much right at that time. We've got a few texts coming in, some stuff on the YouTube chat, so we'll get to that. Along with further updates, we'll expand out a little bit to the Pac-12, see some updates from other schools in the Pac-12. I kind of did a big double check on the spreadsheet I have of going through and trying to find which players have entered, which players have returned. So I did a bunch of updates there, so we'll kind of go over that as well.
Oregon State, they got a couple of players today. I don't know if you've added those, but they've been active.
Yeah, they've added 2 transfers, so we'll get to that as well, as there are some additions for some of the team. Mostly, Boise, Oregon State, and Utah State are the only ones that I know of that have officially signed anybody. So we'll get to that coming up next here on the Full Court Press. Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here with Eric Frandsen, talking Utah State basketball transfer portal updates. And if you want to keep up to date, just check out Cache Valley Daily. You should be able to find the full title, Utah State 2026 Men's and Women's Basketball Transfer and Roster Tracker. Takes you about 0.7 business days to say the whole title, but SEO doesn't always. If you just type basketball transfer tracker, you might pull up my article. I don't know. There's a bunch of them.
Good stuff in there about the players who are here, those are sticking around, and information about and easy to find information about what the roster is going to look like so far.
Yeah, basically, it's you keep a pin on it. It ends up being kind of your one-stop shop for who's staying, who's going, what's the roster look like next year.
It's a living document.
Yeah, eventually links to, because I'm doing in-depth breakdowns on all these players. I'm currently working on the one for Will Hornseth. There'll be stuff for women's basketball coming up as well on some of the newcomers. Some breakdowns on those players as well. So a lot of fun stuff coming up down the pipeline for a lot of these newcomers. And yeah, just keeping an eye on, who's coming and who's going. One thing about, I guess who's not coming, this is a player that we've had our eyes on, potentially coming to Utah State, Leon Bond III from Northern Iowa. He has committed, but not to Utah State. He's going to Iowa State. So the Aggies did not land the 6'5" wing who's averaged about 12 points, 5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. He was like a top 150. I don't know if he is anymore because I think Evan Mia had him ranked 150th. But with more players entering, I don't know if he's gone up or down. But yeah, he's a pretty solid recruit. But the Aggies couldn't land him over Iowa State. That's hard to beat that.
Hard to compete against that program and their resources and where they play.
Yeah. But the Aggies did officially sign Will Hornseth today. So that is the first of 11 additions, either through the transfer portal or if there are any high school recruits that end up coming to Utah State, like following that maybe formally committed to Northern Iowa, but then maybe switch their commitment to Utah State. There's at least a couple that the Aggies have been going over. They've been trying to bring on visits.
One was supposed to be on campus today.
Yeah, but that same player, Xavier Zenz, also has visits with Wisconsin and Iowa. So
Iowa or Illinois?
Or Illinois, excuse me, Illinois. So a couple of tough schools to beat for what is a very talented
do you
wing.
want to play? Do you want to be a star, or do you want to be a bench rotation guy?
Do you want to be a guy who plays 7 games, be a human victory cigar and or red shirt, and then be recruited over again and end up in the transfer portal?
Yep. Those are the questions that he has to weigh and kind of figure out when schools like that are talking to him.
Yeah. Let's get to a few of our texts on the Young Power Sports of Logan text line, as well as some of the chats on YouTube. We'll actually start on YouTube. Braden Clark asking, what are the odds we get some light blue uniforms in the future? I love seeing the light blue becoming more popular.
It's not
the
normal color.
I don't know if we'll see a light blue like primary color. I think
the Aggies to look like BYU?
No, not that light. It's like the Utah Mammoth blue.
So
like the one that was lining the home jerseys late in the year.
So more like North Carolina?
I guess. It's more that baby blue, or I don't know if that's a proper term for it. I like that light blue color,
ice blue.
I do think that the fact that it isn't Utah State's color makes me lean against it, and it's not.
You know how I felt about the Spectrum Magic jerseys.
I kind of like that though. I actually kind of like that.
So when you go outside your traditional color scheme,
Eric wants the Aggies,
have a problem.
Eric wants to see them in Aggie blue and fighting white and no other color in existence.
If it heralds to like this is something that was done before, like a throwback, cool.
I mean, if we go back far enough, like with the football team, they just wore whatever clothes they woke up in. That's what they wore to their first ever football game. Should we go back to that? Like just brown beanies and purple pants or whatever. I don't know if they would have had purple pants back in 1892, but
Highlander plaid.
Yeah, something like that. Would you be okay with a Highlander plaid jersey?
I mean, hey, if it was used before,
I don't think it ever was.
It was discussed, but I don't think it's ever pulled off. A couple other texts coming in 2444. I find it kind of amusing that Utah State has had better success at retaining its key players despite a coaching change than many of the Mountain West's other top programs with returning coaches, notably San Diego State, New Mexico, Boise. I think it speaks to the university and commitment to the program.
Yeah, I think so. Like, Utah State's got some really solid buy-in from some of its key players. One is a local guy, but Carson's from Texas. Like, he's bought into the program. I know he has ties, obviously. I believe he's LDS, at least his family is. So obviously there's kind of that inherent tie to Utah State, but like, just because you're LDS doesn't mean you're tied to the state of Utah.
Nope.
So the fact that you've got buy-in, obviously from a local guy, but also from a guy like Carson Templin. And, New Mexico, I know we were talking about the Pac-12, but like, they just lost Jake Hall to the portal. There is some talk about him still considering a return to New Mexico. But that's the guy that Eric Olin, I believe someone was saying Eric Olin has been recruiting Jake Hall since like Hall was in like the 8th grade. That's the guy you've had a connection with for freaking ever.
Well,
and you can't hang on to him.
The funny thing too is that Hall's younger brother is on campus this weekend for an official visit.
Oh, really?
And so the timing is really weird that Jake Hall's name appears in the portal on the same day that his younger brother's on campus for a recruiting visit at New Mexico.
Yeah.
So kind of weird.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. But
the point is, Utah State's able to keep a core group of guys despite a coaching change. Some of the programs coaches the same, but they're not able to hold on to their players. So it speaks to the culture here, the commitment from the fans, from the university and other stakeholders to help convince these guys that there's definite value in sticking around.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that really has helped Utah State weather the storm of when players have left. They were able to bring in guys who maybe if it's only for a year or two, they buy in. But I think you're saying maybe an improvement from the program that, look, these guys are buying now. They're not just buying in for the 1 year; they're buying in for multiple years. Like with Mason and Carson for 4 years through like 5 different coaches. It's felt like for them. They're still buying in.
1818 on the Young Power Sports of Logan text line. I think Gonzaga, Utah State, and Colorado State have done their part to be at the top of the new pack, but Oregon State has been very impressive. They probably compete next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think with Gonzaga, a lot of it is kind of an assumption that they're going to be good next year because they've lost a decent amount to the portal and to graduation, more so to graduation. That's kind of been their biggest area of attrition where guys just ran out of eligibility. And they've lost a few key guys to the portal, but they do have.
They still have Mark Few.
Yeah, Mark Few. They got Braden Huff.
Still the coach, and he knows how to recruit, and he knows how to coach.
Yeah, so Gonzaga is going to be fine next year. And as 1818 said, Colorado State, who's returning like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players. Yeah. Josh Pasquarelli, he was a player who was kind of undecided. I hadn't seen whether he was going or staying. There's reports that he is staying.
Oh, wow.
So you bring him back. So you got guys at guard, on the wing, in the front court, basically everywhere. Maybe a little less on the wing. It's more like they got front court guys and back court guys, but some of these guys can play on the wing. So even if they're listed more at guard, but Colorado State's going to be looking perfectly fine for next year. And if they add a good solid transfer or two, then that's going to be a real team to watch out for. And then, Utah State keeping their core players.
And Oregon State, some big transfer news for them this yesterday and today. Mostly today? But getting a really good player out of Idaho. Idaho had a really good year. Some people say, Idaho Vandals, okay, whatever. But they were a really good basketball team this year. And getting a 6'7" wing player who scored a bunch for them. Then a 7-footer out of BYU, who really didn't do much for them, but he was a big-time recruit.
Yeah,
there were a lot of expectations on him. I think he had an injury, didn't play that much, but now he's shifting to Oregon State. So in a short amount of time, they're picking up some pretty interesting recruits.
Yeah, and winning a recruiting battle against UNLV. He's a Las Vegas native and transferring this, okay, come back to UNLV. UNLV's made a big stink about their revenue sharing numbers that they're going to have. They're trying to be the top, G6 mid-major school. And Oregon State, who's struggled a little bit in football and basketball, being able to win a recruiting battle to bring someone, this is a consensus top 40 recruit last year. And they're bringing him in to be part of their rebuild this year. And for their coach, suddenly forgetting his name, who was the last coach to take the reins of his school in the Pac-12, he's added 2 transfers already in Rasmussen and Stanton.
Yeah.
So there's a couple others. Boise State has 1. Utah State has 1. As far as I'm aware, Texas State, San Diego State, Gonzaga, Fresno State, and Colorado State have not added any transfers. So we've got the newest guy in the conference, and he's added as many recruits as the rest of the conference combined.
Yeah.
So just kind of an interesting.
Yeah, Justin Joyner's going to work. He was helped coach Michigan to the national championship, and he's quickly turned around and going to work for Oregon State.
Yeah. 9-3-1-5 on the text line saying, can't you just call it the big bag or no bag transfer portal? Seems easier.
Okay. Then 5338 texting in. Don't forget that Mark Few is also good at bending his elbow.
Not sure.
Not sure I understand that reference.
That went right over our heads.
Yeah. But yeah, portal news. Utah State officially makes Will Hornseth officially official that he's joining the team. Utah State women's basketball continuing to announce players are sticking around. Quite a few of them sticking around, sticking with the plan that Wes Brooks is putting in place. So some good things happening for Utah State women's basketball. Men's basketball, there's recruits are on campus.
Yeah,
they're bringing guys in. They're doing calls. I know they're doing the work.
Yeah,
there's still a lot of time to figure out who's even in the portal and who would fit with what Coach Ben Jacobson wants to execute at Utah State.
Man, so that's where obviously fans are getting. We're getting to the point where they're like, hey, we're getting players in. Are we getting players in? And right now, Utah State, and really everybody, is in the state of we got to get guys for visits, bring guys in, let them see what the campus is like, have in-person meetings. A lot of them will have likely had Zoom meetings or something to that effect. But get them on campus, let them see the facilities, meet the players, because a lot of times the players can be just as big in recruiting. Recruiting because these are going to be their teammates. These guys that they're going to connect with, honestly, more than the head coach.
Yeah,
they'll connect with the players, and so that's also where bringing in guys, having or returning Mason and Carson are huge because they are themselves as important in the recruiting process, if not more important in the recruiting process than Ben Jacobson or any of the assistants that he's in the process of bringing in. So.
Absolutely. Now, part of this, the interesting thing that's happening in this portal process is there are reports that people are out there, some bad actors are out there trying to overinflate what players may actually be worth just to try to drive up the costs and value of some of these players to sign for new destinations, which is going to make it a lot harder for schools like Utah State to compete to some degree for some of the players they thought they could be able to get.
Yeah. So we do need to take a break, so we're going to tease that right before we hit that, and then we'll talk about that coming up next here on the Full Court Press.
Young Power Sports of Logan has the ultimate service center. It can handle any make, any model, 100% of the time. They even offer free pickup and drop-off anywhere in Cache Valley. So it's Young Power Sports, making it possible for an easy fix. Just Google Young Power Sports Logan for Cache Valley's premier power sports service department. And they sponsor our text line, 435-339-0321, 5338, providing a little bit of clarity to his text earlier about Mark Few bending his elbow. It says Coach Few was busted for a DUI not that long ago. Yeah, that was I looked it up during the break. It was in September of 2021. Apparently he was driving a little over the legal limit, had to pay a fine and do some community service, got suspended for one game.
Is he a Georgia alum?
Mark Few?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a joke.
Okay. Yeah, had some problems down
I guess
there.
not street racing, just good old-fashioned DUI.
The 9315, we will get into this text a little bit later, so we'll pin that. So we'll come back on that topic. But we teased the fact that there are some bad actors out there trying to overinflate like players in the portal and what their values are, and how problematic that can be for a place like Utah State.
Yeah, well, Jerry Carino, he's a basketball writer in New Jersey, and he sent something out earlier today, really only a couple of hours, no, it was yesterday, excuse me, saying that multiple sources, just people that he talks to and that he trusts, says that there are agents, specifically college sports agents, paying social media influencers to circulate inflated or bogus player payment figures as a way of driving up the market. And this is something that can be really tricky because coaches are not really sharing with each other what they're, there's no like universal knowledge of like what a player is supposed to be worth. There's no like, this isn't like when you go play franchise mode in Madden or whatever equivalent says, this player is worth this much money. Like you do that, like I see that in FIFA. It's like this player is worth 27 million pounds or whatever. Or in the NFL, it's like $30 million. It's like, you're not, looking at a spreadsheet where everyone says that they're worth this much and everyone's offering that much. In college, nobody really knows like what all the other teams are willing to pay.
Yeah.
And so they all end up kind of bidding against each other. People are like, I don't know how much they try and get an idea of like, okay, I think a Mountain West, like we talked to Jared Calhoun a year ago, where it's like a Mountain West starting caliber player is worth like a couple $100,000. But, nobody really knows. And in the end, it turns into, well, it's whatever the market is willing to pay these guys. But,
right. Yeah.
And so they're bidding against ghosts. Essentially, they don't know what everyone else is paying, and then like the agent will come and say like, well, some other school's offering me this much, and if you're a coach, you don't know if that agent is lying to you.
No.
And then coaches might see, for instance, there was a post, I think it was the Field of 68, posting this graphic where he says, here are the prices for elite top 25 portal players. And he says, big men, it's 4 to 5 million. Point guards, 3 to 4 million. Wings is 2.5 to 3 million. And honestly, it's entirely possible that they are being paid to say that,
right?
So that coaches say,
help set the market.
This is how much they're worth, and
this is how much it's going to cost me to get these guys.
And honestly, that sets the floor. And then you start bidding against each other, and that's how you end up with a $6 or $7 million center going to whatever school that's willing to pay that much money for a guy who averaged 12 points and 9 rebounds at such and such other school, who's supposedly a top 25 portal player. Like, and for instance, according to Evan Mia, his metrics, and his stuff isn't gospel, but like Miles Bird, according to his analytics, is a top 25 portal player. He'd probably fall into a wing. So like, is he worth $2.5-3 million? I mean,
so how much Providence is going to pay him?
Yeah, like it's kind of crazy.
Providence have that kind of money?
Apparently, or if that's what, like, maybe that's the information they're working with. So that's something that can inflate the NIL amount. And as you mentioned, it's something that can hurt. This wasn't specifically said in this report, but it is something that can hurt Utah State because, as I've brought up, like there are rumblings. I've not heard anything official from anyone, but a lot of fans are under the impression that Utah State, I guess we did hear something from Utah State talking about trying to double or triple their NIL. So I guess it's not unsubstantiated, but you have Utah State trying to double or triple their NIL. But is that actually going to get them any closer to everyone else in the college sports landscape? Because if they double or triple their NIL, but the price for everyone doubles or triples, have you gotten any closer?
Have you really done any better?
Yeah, and I know there's technically a cap, but in college football, they're like double or tripling the cap and how much money openly double or tripling the cap and how much they're paying. And I don't know if college basketball are willing to go quite that far, but they're willing to open up their wallets, especially for like Providence. They're in the Big East. They don't have football to deal with. So, or at least not Division I football. So, this kind of thing where, there's an inflation anyway, but agents making it worse by basically sabotaging the process by paying influencers. Again, it's not so much that it's going to be reporters, because reporters have integrity. Like, some you can maybe
Generally
argue,
speaking.
But most of your reporters are going to have the integrity of not, being bought and paid for by agents. A lot of times they'll do favors for agents and things like that, and that's how they can get their sources.
Their
and whatnot.
inside scoops, yeah.
But there are places who have no morals. They are there entirely for clicks. They're using ChatGPT to make graphics about here's how much money everyone has, or here's how much these players are worth. And these are accounts with tens of thousands of followers, and they can end up, maybe if the coaches aren't specifically following them, but they can end up seeing those reports and saying, here's the information. Here's a social media account with 50,000 followers, and they say this is how much a center costs. Well, I guess that's the starting point, and that's what we'll go with. And then when the agent asks for that amount, well, clearly that's the going amount.
Right.
And you end up with this runaway effect where players who probably should only be worth $2 to $3 million based on natural market factors end up being artificially worth 2 or 3 times that, just because of all these shenanigans from agents.
Yeah, you've got a player who may be worth $200,000, but he's on the market saying I'm worth $2 million, because that's what they're trying to say about your size and your production and your experience. And then so some schools are like, well, I can't even compete with that. When normally they probably could have a conversation with that player, but because these inflated values, look at, well, he's out of our market. Like, we can't afford to have a discussion with them, even though really you probably could, but it makes it very complicated. An interesting post too from Trilly Donovan, and says a recurring theme so far this portal cycle is the kids and families forgot the agent works for them and not the other way around.
Yeah, and that's something, and there's been a lot of discussions about agents and making sure they're regulated and different things like that, because in the college sports landscape, and it bleeds over into high school a little bit too, mainly the transition from high school to college, there is an incredibly predatory system. I shouldn't say system, but
opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity. That's kind of what we're going for, because there are a lot of players who, when they start this process, are literally children. And then there are parents, a lot of whom have, over the last decade, sunk thousands of dollars into their child's athletic career. You can have another discussion on how expensive raising an athlete is.
Yes.
And if, their entire, markets based entirely around trying to help, at least on their face, they're trying to help athletes get noticed in the college sphere. Some of those are predatory. Some of those are honest and do their job well. Yeah.
Well, and I heard a really interesting conversation with Dalton Forsyth on our sister station, KVNU, just a few mornings ago. And he said early on in this portal era, NIL era, anybody could claim they were an agent.
Yeah.
And few were qualified. They didn't really understand the process or how it should really work. But as this has continued, more of the real legitimate agents who represent NFL players and NBA players, they're getting more and more in the college space. As their player values are also going up, it makes more sense for them to do that. But it's also improving the professionalism that's going on. So that's good, but there are still a good number of bad actors out there.
Yeah, it's getting better. And there are regulations coming down the line. This is a problem that is actively being worked on. So I don't want to act like this is a problem that's not getting better anytime soon. This is one that people recognize the problem. They're doing something about it. But it can still be a little predatory where agents are preying on, usually it's desperate fringe college players. For a lot of Utah State's players, they're represented by a reputable agent who knows what they're doing. And, so this isn't impacting Utah State as much, but still, The whole,
and sometimes too, just an agent is going to be trying to steer a player to the highest monetary value possible.
Yeah, because that's their.
But for the player, it doesn't always make the most sense for them personally and professionally.
Yeah,
because sometimes there's a better place for them based on the school, the coach, the system, where they will have an opportunity to flourish. They may not earn as much as some other destination, but it will be better for them as an individual.
Yeah.
So sometimes agents are not always having the athletes with their best intentions.
The agent's primary motivation, unless they are just a genuinely good, honest human being who will work with the athlete for their best interest, that's what an agent should do. But keep in mind that agents are human, and agents are also looking after number one,
paid.
And it is in their best interest to get you to make the most amount of money, whether or not you like your new situation or not. They want you to get the bag because it means they get a part of it.
Yes.
We got to take a break, and we come back with some other news in the portal. I think we already mentioned it with Jake Hall, but he's leaving New Mexico, a big portal loss for New Mexico. Well, we'll see if he ends up leaving. He says he's considering a return to New Mexico, but we'll talk about that a little bit next here on the Full Court Press. Napa Auto Parts has batteries, headlights, wiper blades, all in stock and on sale now. Again, at your local Napa Auto Parts, they got locations from Preston all the way down to Providence. They got Chemical Guys Car Wash, detailing kits are only $49.99. Air fresheners, shop towels, seafoam, and more. So check it out today. In locations for Napa Auto Parts from Preston all the way down to Providence. So, yeah, some news from New Mexico. We might jump into this a little bit later with some potential New Mexico-related news. But, yeah, Jake Hall, obviously, you can argue the best player, him or Tomislav Buljan. You can lean one way or the other. But Jake Hall was, I think, first team all-conference.
Mountain West freshman of the year.
Yeah, freshman of the year. So he's a player that a lot of people had their eyes on. Set the freshman record for three-pointers at New Mexico. Did he set the Mountain West freshman record? That's possible.
Possible.
I don't know if I remember seeing something specifically about that, but certainly would have come close if he did not hit it. I think it was 117 three-pointers, which is close to Utah State's, I think, single-season record, period.
Yeah.
And I think it was New Mexico's maybe single-season record, or at least close to it. So, yeah, he's entering the portal with a do not contact tag, which is weird because you usually only see that. Not saying exclusively see that, but usually you're seeing that with the player who's like following their coach, like Will Hornseth, entered with a do not contact tag. Adlan Elamine, do not contact tag, kind of a presumption that he's going to go to Cincinnati.
But hasn't committed yet.
Yeah, hasn't committed yet. Well, I think the Aggies are still fighting really hard for to keep Adlan Elamine. But, yeah, where Eric Olin, as far as I'm aware, isn't going anywhere, or New Mexico. Most of the coaching vacancies have been filled. But, yeah, all entering the portal. He's from California, so maybe he's going somewhere there. I've heard rumblings that San Diego State may be trying to replace their depleted roster with him.
Or that UCLA may take another run at a good New Mexico guard.
Yeah, that might be another case there. That's going to do it for us in the first hour. We're going to talk more Pac-12 basketball coming up next here on the Full Court Press. Welcome on back to the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here with Eric Frandsen on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM The Fan. Streaming online at 1069thefan.com and on the 1069 The Fan mobile app. And streaming live on YouTube. The Fan KLGN is the YouTube account you can find. Just search for that and subscribe if you want to watch our video streams and not just listen to them. In the many ways that you can listen to them, over the air or streaming. But we're glad to have you on, however you're watching, listening, following along on the podcast feed after the fact, which you can find on 1069thefan.com and on the mobile app and on YouTube. You find replays of our streams. We're glad to have you on board. 435-339-0321 is the number you can text to join the show via our Young Power Sports of Logan text line. Been talking a lot of updates on Utah State basketball, transfer portal updates, a little bit of Pac-12 as well. That was our topic for the first hour. Gave those updates. Utah State officially signing Will Hornseth. Utah State women's basketball retaining, Macy Brown officially re-signing with the Aggies, and I think they're up to, or they have 7 players potentially returning from last year's roster, which is the most in I think 5 or 6 seasons. So some progress being made by Wes Brooks in player retention, which is something that the last 2 or 3 coaches, self included, hadn't been able to do really up until now. This hour, we're going to talk a little bit about Pac-12 attendance for basketball. Eric, you were looking through some of the numbers earlier today. Some reporting from Chris Murray, where he put together some numbers, but also Casey Smurthwaite going through some of these numbers as
Hero
well.
Sports, yeah.
Yeah, so just what were some of the trends that you saw as you looked through some of these?
Yeah, so interesting stuff here. Looking at the comparing teams in the Mountain West, when you look at their overall attendance information for the season, and Chris Murray goes through the whole Mountain West, but he also looks at the kind of the trends in the Mountain West over the last several years, really since 2010. 2011, the average attendance in the Mountain West was just over 9,000. And it's been on a steady decline since then. It did kind of bump back up a little bit when in 2012, 2013, but that was when TCU left. Nevada and Fresno State were added. We got up to 8,700. Utah State joins in 2013, 2014. At that time, it was about 7,700 was the average attendance in the Mountain West. And then it slipped down. Of course, COVID affects some things. But in 23-24, it was at 6,980. But this last year, it was 6,750. So there's been some declining attendance. And this was the year that they added Grand Canyon. So you think adding Grand Canyon should help some things. But Air Force was really bad. Their average attendance was barely 1,300. Fresno State was not good. San Jose State was not good. Wyoming struggled. So there were some teams who had really steep declines in their overall home attendance. Air Force had like a minus 19.5%. Fresno State had a minus 14.5%. Boise State had a minus 7.6% in their attendance. UNLV saw an increase. They were up 8%. Colorado State had an increase. Nevada had increases. So it wasn't doom and gloom for everybody. Some schools saw increases. But one of the things that stand out to me when you look at these numbers, that you have to take this with a really big grain of salt. Utah State comes in 4th on these numbers. Average attendance, 9,682 per game. Respectable numbers for Utah State. But when you look at how they stand in comparison to other Pac-12 or Mountain West schools, New Mexico, number 1, 12,133. San Diego State, 11,567 per game. Okay, those are big venues, traditional programs, good fan bases.
Yeah, and successful seasons, so that's going to drive attendance pretty well.
So it makes sense. Coming in at number 3, ahead of Utah State, it's not Nevada, who said they had an increase. It wasn't UNLV, who also had an increase. It was Boise State, who they say averaged 9,999 people in attendance every game. There is no way that is accurate.
Yeah, that is complete bogus. Like, Boise State's cooking the books with their attendance.
Yeah, that is bonkers. Now, Casey Smurthwaite, as we mentioned for Hero Sports, put together something similar, looking at all of average attendance throughout college basketball. He only listed the top 50. Would love to have seen more of this data. But you look at, there are several Mountain West schools who appear in the top 50. New Mexico, they come in at number 28. San Diego State right behind them at number 29. And then there is Boise State at 38 and Utah State at 40. When you're looking at average attendance. And then Nevada coming in at 48, also on the list. But one thing that Smurthwaite points out that I think you have to consider when you look at Boise State's numbers, he says when looking at these numbers, they include tickets purchased such as season tickets and student fee allocations or actual scanned gate attendance. So there are some schools who will count the coaches and the cheerleaders and who's on the scorer's table and the press. Like, there is no way on God's green earth that Boise State had better attendance numbers than Utah State this past season.
Utah State had better attendance at Boise State than Boise State had at their own game.
Yeah, in one of their games. Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting to see kind of where Utah State falls and some of the schools like moving to the Pac-12, like where do things kind of stand there? Because when you look at the schools that are leaving the Mountain West, some of the top teams or some of the top venues for fan attendance are in those that are headed to the new Pac-12. And this is kind of buried at the very bottom of Chris Murray's piece. It says if you swap out the schools that are headed to the Mountain West or to the Pac-12 with the schools that are coming into the Mountain West, there would have been a significant decrease in attendance, a nearly 25% drop. So one more reason why moving to the Pac-12 is a good decision and a good place for Utah State.
Yeah, well, like, because of the 4, best attended, Boise State, it's alleged, they're probably worse. If we're looking at reality, they're probably worse than Colorado State, who had an up and down season.
Yeah.
But yeah, like New Mexico is really the one school remaining in the Mountain West who has a strong home court venue. Other programs have good venues. UNLV, at least if they ever actually truly get back on their feet instead of just being this Jekyll and Hyde program, that's, Thomas and Mack's a solid venue. Nevada, that's a hard place. I mean,
they've had moments. Yeah.
I mean, it's Lawler. It is an impossible place to win. It is a fortress.
Grand Canyon's venue is not as big, but they fill it and they're rowdy. So
they're rowdy during timeouts. I've heard now from probably a half dozen different places and so I've not been to Grand Canyon personally, so I cannot attest to this myself, but passing along now, again, close to a half dozen secondhand accounts, is that it is the most artificial, like, rowdy environment that a lot of these people had been to, where it's louder during timeouts than it is during the game. Just going to pass that along.
Interesting. So, I mean, San Diego State, really good numbers, right? Boise State, that seems artificial, but they have had decent fan attendance in the past. They're not always as engaged, but they usually have okay fan attendance. This year, that's a joke, what they're trying to put out there.
Yeah, that's not.
Utah State, obviously we know what happened there. A lot of sellouts this season. But then we look at other teams that are going to the Pac-12. The numbers were also released for the West Coast Conference. Gonzaga, well, they have a smaller venue. They fill it. Their average attendance, 6,339. And they listed it as 105% of capacity. So how does that happen? I mean, standing room, they're counting the people on press row and the coaches and the cheerleaders. So maybe there's some funny business going on there. But the bottom line is they fill their venue. It may not be as big as the Spectrum or Viejas, but they fill their venue, and they fill it regularly. Washington State, they were only about 28% of capacity, but they averaged 3,332 fans this season. Oregon State, 3,024 at 32% of capacity. So those were two teams that were way down based on normal years, or what their potential is. So interesting to see though if they can rebound, because they do have nicer venues, they have bigger venues, but they've been struggling to fill those venues. And then Sunbelt for Texas State, pretty far down there.
Yeah,
averaging about 1,700 people per home game.
Yeah, they're definitely bringing up the rear of this Pac-12 train, but the key with Texas State and with Oregon State and Washington State is they have to elevate themselves.
Yes.
They have to. I mean, for Texas State, they just have to elevate their program in general because they're the up-and-comer, at least that's the hope for the Pac-12, is that they're an up-and-comer, not a bottom feeder that they're just letting in because they need an eighth member.
Mm-hmm.
And for Oregon State and Washington State, they got to be their, old Pac-12, at least as good as some of the old Pac-12, some of their better seasons in the old Pac-12. Because, they've got some good venues in football and basketball. And right now, when you look at the metrics and all that, they're about as good as the middling teams in the Mountain West, the Utah State and San Diego State and all these other Mountain West teams are running away from.
Yeah, if you were to so in the West Coast Conference, Washington State and Oregon State, they had the third and fourth best average attendance. But they're playing against teams that have high school gyms for their fans. But if you were to plug them into the Mountain West based on average attendance, they're at or near the bottom. They're below Wyoming and just above San Jose State at 10th and 11th. They'd be wedged in between Wyoming and San Jose in average attendance per game.
Yeah, and that's not a place you want to be.
No,
we talk about those places being
about.
cavernous, dead environments, and talking about how it's more challenging to play in a place where you can hear the echo of the ball off the sound of the ball dribbling off the ceiling.
Juice and energy in a dead venue. That's why San Jose and Air Force have always been challenging places, because there's nothing there. You have to build that energy yourself.
Yeah, so it's just you don't want to be you ran away from all these schools in the Mountain West so that you could form the better mid-major conference, be a fringe high major. Well, Oregon State and Washington State got to pick up the pace because Utah State's bringing it. Boise State claims they're bringing it. San Diego State's bringing it. Gonzaga's bringing it. Texas State is working their way up. We'll see if they can crack 2,000 on average. But you need the places with the bigger venues and resources to actually live up to their potential.
Well, and you got to fill those venues. If you have a big venue but you don't fill it, then it's just
it's an embarrassment.
Utah costs you more money. You still have to turn the lights on. You still have to heat it. You still have to put employees at all the places to come in and out. And if they're just twiddling their thumbs with no people to watch over, it's a cost. It's just an expense that you can't recover.
Yeah, Utah as a program is an embarrassment because they have to put curtains on their upper bowl, because they're embarrassed of how many empty seats can be seen on the broadcast. Yeah,
and I wonder with Washington State and Oregon State, just the how things are changing with teams that are participating and coming into their venues. Like, how much will that affect things? Like, did their fan base, did they struggle to get excited about these schools in the West Coast Conference that are small schools, small venues that they just don't know, and they're just not familiar with, don't care about? Certainly Gonzaga and St. Mary's, those teams move the needle. But for a lot of these other schools, you probably don't even know who they are, and it's hard to really figure that out. Will that be different with... there'll be some unfamiliarity with these new schools coming into from the Mountain West, but at least these are programs that have bigger venues, who have richer traditions with basketball. So will that carry over? Will those fans in Pullman be more interested to come to games? Those fans in Corvallis, will more of them come because there's Colorado State on the schedule, or Boise State? Will they come to more of these games because these are more legitimate, on the regular, more legitimate basketball programs that will be there on their home venue from night in and night out? I'm trying to look up. Okay, so I'll put this out there. So Oregon State's average attendance was what was it? 3,024. So their home game against Gonzaga drew 7,800, almost 7,900. So folks come out to see the big name.
They come out to see Gonzaga now, so they'll probably get another 7,000-8,000, maybe more if Gonzaga was Oregon State was 500 at the time. 13-13 when they faced him. Finished, I think, 17-16 or something like that. So, do they show up as much for Utah State and San Diego State? I'm not 100% sure because, like, those are solid draws, but Gonzaga is a big name.
Yes.
Utah State
absolutely.
and San Diego State, those are programs that most of the Beavers fan base has looked down on San Diego State and Utah State. It's these lower division schools.
For a long time, yes.
So, I don't know. Are they really going to come out? I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, Oregon State and Washington State's fan bases need to step up.
Right, because they looked down their noses at West Coast Conference, apparently.
Yeah.
They didn't turn out to support their team. Now, there was a coaching change at Oregon State, maybe some new excitement with their new coach and what he's trying to bring. Washington State, these are two programs that were 30% of capacity this last year. They winning was a challenge for them, even in the West Coast Conference, where Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara even was solid, but Washington State and Oregon State should have been better than they were in the West Coast Conference in their short time there for basketball.
Yeah, they should. They're supposed to be the survivors of the Pac-12. These power conference, they like to fancy themselves as still being power conference schools.
Right. They want to spend like they're a power conference school. They want to act like a power conference school.
Yeah.
But they do not behave like a power conference
No,
school.
their performance on the court, their fans in the seats, well, they're not in the seats. They're dressed up as empty seats.
Yes.
So these are two programs that have to be able to step up. Because this new Pac-12 group project feels like it's being mostly done by 3 or 4 schools.
Yeah.
So
the newcomers are going to take over and own this thing.
Yeah.
Because the guys who've been there for a while, they've been slipping, and there's not a lot of signs to indicate that they're turning things around.
Yeah, but like Utah State and San Diego State and Boise State can't carry the conference by themselves. They couldn't carry the Mountain West by themselves.
No.
It was, they were the ones leading the way in football and especially basketball. I know New Mexico's obviously in the mix in basketball, but Utah State and San Diego State have been carrying the Mountain West for the most part, and it's just kind of slowly gone downhill. Like those two programs have been amazing. They make the tournament, but they couldn't carry the entire conference on their own. Boise State can't, they've been carrying the Mountain West in football for years. They can't really do it themselves. And the whole point of this Pac-12 thing was that you were going to have 8 of the strongest mid-major G6 teams. And it's not that you're going to have 1 or 2, it's that you're going to have 8 or at least like
multiples.
5 or 6.
Right.
Like not everyone's going to be great every single year, but like more than half the conference is going to be like,
good.
Yeah, good. Like solid bowl game caliber in football, at least 1 or 2 college football playoff appearance, caliber teams. And in basketball, Gonzaga, Utah State, San Diego State, get Boise State and Colorado State. Like you're looking at trying to get at least 3 and more likely 4 or 5 tournament teams. But you look at where these programs are at right now, you'd barely be meeting the minimum. I mean, this last year was just Gonzaga and Utah State. So you'd be below that, anticipated minimum. And the fact that Oregon State and Washington State, as these Pac-12 leftovers, they can't even carry their own weight, but they were the ones who were leading the way in this whole Pac-12 experiment of only taking some of the Mountain West. They're performing at the level of the teams that they did, they look down their noses on. We don't want to be in a conference with Wyoming. Well, you're performing about as well as Wyoming. So why are you talking all this much crap?
Yeah. And it really speaks to how many fans do they really have? Like how many people are really a fan of your institution versus how many were showing up because it's Washington State versus UCLA. Oh, it's Washington State versus USC. Okay. It's Washington State versus Stanford. How many were actually showing up for Washington State? And how many were showing up because this is a pretty high-profile team that's coming in and I want to be there to watch this high-profile team in my venue?
Yeah.
And what this illustrates is, to me at least, is that their core fan base probably isn't really that big.
Yeah, they were just fans of the Pac-12. Like, if you're a fan of Utah State, you are dedicated to Utah State.
That is clear evidence.
Yeah,
that has been proven time and time again.
Yeah, because you walk into the store.
Coaching change, conference change. It's the fan base is there, and they show out and they're loyal.
Yeah, they support, and like especially in the state of Utah, you walk into the store and there's a BYU hat and there's a Utah hat next to it, and only half the time are you going to see Utah State hat there. Like, you are dedicated to Utah State if you're a fan of Utah State. If you're New Mexico, obviously they're kind of the one major brand. I know New Mexico State's in there, but still, you're dedicated to New Mexico. Whether or not you say they're the only one, they're still very dedicated. They've proved they travel well, they attend well. You know, if you're San Diego State, there's a whole lot else to do in California. You're dedicated to that school.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, with Boise State, they're super dedicated, at least in football. Basketball, again, depending on how much you think they fudge the numbers. But in football, they show up in big numbers.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, Colorado State, where you got the University of Colorado, that's a huge deal. But University of Colorado or Colorado State fans, they're dedicated. Fresno State fans, they're feeling it a little bit right now, but in football, they're still pretty strong.
Right.
So, like, all of these schools, when you're a mid-major and you have a fan base, you know they're dedicated to you because half the time there's a high-major school across the way.
Yeah, not that far away.
But for Oregon State and Washington State, are they truly dedicated to you, to guys wearing your colors? Or was it just, you had somebody attend your school, but a lot of times they're showing up, as you said, because UCLA's in the building, because it's Stanford, USC,
Oregon, Washington.
Yeah, are you showing up for the Oregon State game? Like, because, you know, you went to Oregon State and your buddy in the other cubicle went to Oregon. Like, are you, you know, showing up because of that rivalry? Oregon State and Washington State fans need to be invested in their program. They need to be invested in this Pac-12 experiment. And we're getting the impression that they're just not. Yeah,
the last 2 seasons have been disappointing. Where they should have been in a position to say, hey, we came from a power conference. We still believe we're in a power conference, but they're really not acting like they are in a power conference. And understandable why some schools decided to leave them behind.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about maybe potential candidates. Are there teams that actually are going to be invested in their team heading into the Pac-12? At least
the Pac-12 still needs to grow.
Yeah, they still need to grow. They still need new names, new faces, or perhaps old familiar faces to join the new Pac-12. There's at least one somewhat random guy who claims to have sources on Twitter, who
heard something on a podcast.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that one. It's a school we've heard before, but we'll discuss that a little bit next.
There is conference expansion and realignment that's happened to them.
That's true. We'll talk about that as well in 2603 on the Young Power Sports text line, also suggesting names. So we'll wrap that all together coming up next here on the Full Court Press, or as I should say, the Conference Realignment and Expansion Show.
Yes. Mountain Valley Heating and Air is offering $25 carbon monoxide home safety inspections. As you make your family safer, every dollar helps more families in need receive a complete HVAC system for free during the Feed the Love, Feel the Love, not Feed the Love, Feel the Love.
Still feeding the love in some way.
Yes. Heating and air conditioning giveaway. Just go to mtnvalleyhvac.com. Nominate a family in need or schedule your safety inspection. And reminder that they've got $25 carbon monoxide home inspection available. So check them out on the web or call 435-753-5170.
So we go to the Young Power Sports of Logan text line. One for 9-5. We're having difficulty interpreting some of your most recent texts. I think I've
turned it over to Jason to try it because I
was trying to read it and see what's going on. I don't know if your text to speech just isn't working properly. We're not quite able to parse out the meaning of some of these texts. So send them again because we don't want to ignore what your input, but we're having trouble. Again, text to speech is still an emerging technology. So help us out a little bit there. Resend some of these texts, and we'll definitely get to them. 2603, though, sending in this. We're talking about conference realignment and expansion. Actually, should I play the bit really quick here?
I think we should.
Sorry for those on the stream. I don't think the audio bit came through.
Oh, conference realignment and expansion show.
I didn't have the right buttons pushed.
It's what we do here. Occasionally parading as the full court press.
Yeah. So real quick, we'll get to 2603 saying thoughts on Tulsa as a candidate for the Pac-12. And yeah, we've had a lot of like Midwest or like kind of the western half of the Midwest. A lot of times they'll get suggested
Central Time Zone.
Yeah, basically Central Time Zone teams in Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana,
Memphis.
Yeah, Memphis. That's getting a bit east, but I think they're part of Tennessee is in the Central Time Zone. I think the time zone line goes. Right, I think it goes through the Tennessee.
It's split. Yeah.
Where like the western third is in the central, and then the eastern part is in. I think Kentucky's the same way.
Right. I think you're right.
So I went on a trip to Kentucky, and for a couple of days I was in the Eastern Time Zone, and then a couple other days I was in Central Time Zone. It's really weird. But yeah, so I can't remember. I've probably looked at some of the numbers for Tulsa. I can't remember what it was. Like they have a decent football program. I don't know much about their basketball program actually.
Well, they did. They participated in the NIT.
That's right. They made the Final Four.
They had a nice little run in the NIT. I think they've got a coach who, at one point, he was somebody that was sometimes talked about as potential candidate for Utah State. But I can't speak to the if there's a rich basketball tradition at Tulsa.
I wouldn't call it rich. I mean, 30-8 this year, so give them the credit there. But 13-20 the year before that, 16-15, 5-25. They've not had a really good string of winning seasons outside of. I mean, if you go back to like the mid 2000s, I'm just looking at their win-loss by year. The mid 2010s they were okay. The mid to late 2000s, they were actually pretty solid, though they didn't make the tournament a whole lot in that time. They had a bunch of 20-win seasons, but didn't make the tournament a whole lot. Their strongest seems to be late 90s into the early 2000s, where they made the tournament like 8 times in looks like 10 years. I guess Bill Self was the coach at one point during that stretch.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we're ranked a little bit, but they're kind of removed from their solid history. I mean, they'd probably be about as strong as Texas State was, though. So I don't want to dump on Tulsa. Also, they're very close to my birthplace, so Tulsa has I have a soft spot for Tulsa.
Yeah, a little bit of an appeal. Yeah, and so they've had some moments in football, and certainly football is the biggest driver of conference expansion. But the Pac-12, looking at Texas, the Texas State experiment, like you kind of get football, but you've got a millstone around your neck for basketball. They Baseball is really good. Some other sports are nice, but really football should be the driver. Is Tulsa a team that can do that? Maybe. They've kind of been up and down. They've had some moments where they've had some good programs. Some actual coaches from around here have spent some significant time there over the years. But there's also some chatter that a school that may be a little bit more familiar to folks around here could be in discussion for a Pac-12 target.
Yeah, basically, I think this eventually stems from John Canzano, where I think it originated from, because it came from some guy on Twitter. I don't like reporting on stuff from guys on Twitter. I like to find some legitimate reporting. But basically, it all comes around.
He's getting his information from a more reputable source.
Yeah, he's basically passing it along from Canzano, where New Mexico is apparently kind of resurfacing. New Mexico is a team that's been tossed around for the potential Pac-12 membership. UNLV is in there as well. Like, to me, the two best expansion targets for the Pac-12 are, at least, if you're setting aside potential legal issues and, the fact that the Mountain West has a lot of these schools has all their schools tied up for the next few years. To me, your two best expansion targets are UNLV and New Mexico.
Yeah.
You have two programs that have, their football programs are probably the thing that kept, or at least mostly kept them out. Of course, UNLV turned down the Pac-12 because they got bribed by the Mountain West. But their football program is emerging. Their basketball is trying to. They've been perpetually they've been perpetually about to have their comeback year for like 5 years now, where they get all these high-level recruits, and then they go 17-15. New Mexico, they've kind of been, one where they've had a really strong basketball program, one of the best in the Mountain West. They've won Mountain West titles. They've had Mountain West Player of the Year. They've had, success getting into the tournament. Even in recent years, UNLV, if you go back far enough, they've had success, but New Mexico's had recent success and recent good runs. They have arguably the best venue in the conference, and now with San Diego State and Utah State gone, they definitely have the best venue.
Absolutely, yeah.
But their football program has been just straight dog water for a long time. Now it's not. You had Bronco Mendenhall kind of begin that rebuild, got him back a little bit, their first win over a top 25 team in like 2 decades. Jason Eck took that over and ran with it,
right,
to where they were one of the better teams in the conference.
And with his influence, they are for fundraising, and they have plans to do renovations and expansions and actually pour money into the facility, because it's actually it's a decently sized venue, their football venue. Like, if they filled that stadium, that's a good money generator for their program. And they finally have a program that is building on success and looks like it has a future. Now, if they're able to hold on to Coach Eck is another question.
Yeah.
But what Coach Eck is doing is akin to what Gary Anderson did to Utah State, 12, 13, 14 years ago. Can revitalize it, and then it's been mostly at a higher level since then. And if Coach Eck is able to elevate New Mexico in a similar way, then they should be better positioned to kind of maintain or sustain that success moving forward.
Yeah, and that's where I've started to get on the New Mexico to the Pac-12 train. Like with their basketball program and with their, in the process of revitalizing their football program, that is a school that should be in the Pac-12. And if it, because when we're looking at, Pac-12 expansion candidates, we're having to go all the way out again to the eastern portion of the central time zone. And for a mid-major conference, that is just not nearly as tenable as I think a lot of people kind of assume. I mean, I've seen some Utah State fans, they'll talk about Cal and Stanford having to deal with the travel to the ACC.
Yeah.
And say, well, is that going to be annoying enough for them and financially untenable enough to bring them back to the Pac-12? Well, they're making like $20 million. They're only making a portion, I think, for now, of the ACC media deal, which is in the 30 or 40 millions. So they're only making some of that, but it's still double or triple.
It's still way more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And And that makes up for and more, at least in the financial side. Again, the administrators don't give a rat's behind about their athletes' well-being as long as they're making bank. So they're willing to send their athletes into that fire so that they can make that money. But is Tulsa going to be willing to travel to the Pacific, on a weekly basis, especially in some of these non-revenue sports? Can Memphis do that? Can teams in Louisiana all that do that? That is, really difficult to be feasible for a lot of these schools in a conference that, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, the Pac-12's media deal is going to max out at like 15 million or 16 or 17 million. Like maybe with inflation, you'll get up to 20 million, but it's not going to be that much. It's not going to make it worth it for a team on the edge of the Central Eastern time zone split. It's not going to be worth it to them to travel 6 or 7 states away every other week to play in basketball or football. And so that's why, for me, I like to prioritize schools like UNLV and New Mexico as much better expansion targets because they're right there and they're good programs.
Well, and they're in good media markets. Yeah. They're in better media markets than Tulsa. It's a better media market than some of the other programs that have been talked about. New Mexico and for is in the top 50. UNLV is in the top 30 media market.
Yeah, and for New Mexico, even if it's not a giant media market, they're the show in town.
Right.
And they have great support for their university, great support for their basketball, and growing support for football.
Yeah, and the concern would be, Coach Eck has turned things around for football, but will he be there after next season? I don't know.
I mean, Utah State's been cycling through coaches every other year. That didn't seem to be a problem for the Pac-12.
Right, but if it looks like if you have a guy who come in and elevate the program, and then that's the new standard, then you get a different level of candidate that comes in to take over and tries to build upon that.
Yeah, they see what's been built.
So it's not like, he's doing well, and when he leaves, it's going to drop back to the mean. No, you've reset the new level of expectation. So would New Mexico be a good target? Yeah, I think UNLV would be a great target, but I don't know why people keep talking about this because they're locked in. Like nothing can really happen until this Pac-12 versus Mountain West lawsuit gets filed or gets settled. And the only leverage that potentially could happen is if the Mountain West loses all of these legal battles that are going on with the conference and the specific institutions, Utah State, Boise State, Colorado State. If they lose all of those, and all of a sudden they don't have all that money coming in that they were expecting, then UNLV can start to say, now we have leverage to get out of this lockdown clause that you've forced us to not forced us, but we all agreed to sign. That money that you told that we'd be getting as a bribe to stay here, that money's now suddenly not available. Now we can execute a certifiable reason to leave and break that contract. Now, will that then release everybody else? I don't know.
Yeah, well, to me, it's not even necessarily are you going to be able to force circumstances to where they break the contract? Because it goes through, 2030 or 2031 or something like that? Just wait to expand until then. You don't have to do this right now. You don't have to play this immediate game. You can play a bit of the long game, especially where, a lot of media and TV stuff, it's going to be shifting around then. So, let all this legal stuff play out. It'll take years to get through all this Pac-12 versus Mountain West legal battles.
Yeah, it's still ongoing.
It might take about until then, but when that starts to be fully realized, the Pac-12 can make its move where it doesn't have to worry about forcing teams to break contract. Those contracts will be ending. The things that are locking UNLV and New Mexico into their current conference will be ending. So go after them then. You don't have to sign them for next year. The Pac-12 doesn't have to do anything right now.
No, but they want to if they can so that they have more security if in the other round of media rights renegotiations, there's probably going to be more movement in among conferences. So if you want to provide more stability if you can, and adding more schools ensures that you're going to have a little bit more stability moving forward because you can afford to lose one or two. Right now, the Pac-12 cannot afford to lose anybody.
Yeah. Well, I don't think
that's why they need to add a few more if they can.
I don't think they're really at risk of losing anybody. I know Oregon State and Washington State and even UNLV, they've got delusions of going to the Big 12. That's not happening anytime soon. I think, when all these contracts go up for UNLV and New Mexico, that's by the time the media deals are going to be renegotiated for a lot of these places. So make the move then, and that boosts your negotiating power, and you can get a better media deal, theoretically.
Yeah,
that'd be the plan, and try and execute on that. And then at that point, really for the Pac-12, the biggest thing they need to do, like the thing that's going to help them more than anything, is prove that they are just objectively the better place to be. You want to be here because we're sending teams to the playoff. We're providing them the best opportunity for mid-majors to go to the NCAA tournament. We're the place to send, G5 teams to the college football playoff. They need to ensure that they are that conference. And if they, that we talked this whole thing about Oregon State and Washington State stepping up. If they do that, if Utah State continues to rebound from their kind of funk that they're in with college, with football, and as long as all these teams continue to do well in basketball or elevate themselves, as some of the programs need to still elevate themselves in basketball, if all those things happen, then that experiment is a success, and you become that conference that they were pitching to everybody, that they said they'd be, that they'd be the place to make the NCAA tournament from, to make the college football playoff from. And at that point, UNLV, New Mexico, they can't say no. You might even convince Memphis or again, any of these central time zone that, hey, we want to be a part of that. And maybe you get yourself into a 12, 13, 14 team conference where maybe you can even have like an Eastern branch that ends up helping with the geography issue, where you can have maybe 6 schools out in the central time zone and, 8 out in the Pacific and Mountain time zone. Yeah. And you can have the clear-cut best G5, G6 mid-major conference, but there's work that needs to be done. And if you do that work over the next 3-4 years, then once you get to that, 2030, 2031, that's where you can then make the move, because you've established yourself as the clear best conference for a lot of these schools looking to move around. And then the timing ends up working out that you're not having to force them to break contracts or pay giant exit fees.
Yeah, and there's time, between now and when that new realignment or new media deals come up for renewal. There's time for schools to get on a run and to showcase what the new conference could really look like.
Yeah, we're overdue for a break, so we're gonna have to take a break and then probably a quick segment when we come back. But stick around as we continue the discussion here on the Full Court Press. Young Power Sports of Logan has the ultimate service center that can handle any make, any model 100% of the time. They offer free pickup and drop-off anywhere in Cache Valley. So Young Power Sports makes it possible for an easy fix for you. So Google Young Power Sports Logan for Cache Valley's premier power sports service department. So a few things to go over. We got to have a quick segment. We went long in the last one, so we got to get through a few things here. We have some text on the Young Power Sports of Logan text line, 9315, clarifying a little bit with some of his texts. He was talking about when USU beat the Beavers at home. Maybe the fans will show up because USU is legit. Because Utah State beat Oregon State wasn't that the bowl game? That was the bowl game. They beat them in a bowl game.
Utah State beat them in the LA Bowl.
They beat Washington State at Washington State.
And then they lost to Washington State in the Idaho Potato Bowl.
Yeah, so there's some crossover. And then also pointing out Dalton Forsyth basically sending out a tweet where they were basically soliciting transfer portal ideas from fans. I don't know if that'll get passed along to Coach, maybe. But
yeah, there are a lot of interesting names on there.
There are a lot of armchair scouts that may not be able to do the in-depth scouting. I mean, I'm basically an armchair scout, but there's some people who at least will be able to spot. They may not be able to clearly know what's going on, but it's kind of like greatness when you see it, and you can kind of see it in some players. Or
identifying players who may have different connections to the state.
Guys that might be realistic recruiting targets because of their connections to the state. And I think I went through there and I put them all in a spreadsheet. I think there are 68 suggestions as of 2:00 this afternoon. Some of them more realistic than others, but certainly a lot of interesting names there. And then we teased conference realignment and expansion, even played the bit. We didn't actually get to the actual real conference realignment and expansion that is happening. John Rothstein with the report, Eric.
Yeah, UC Santa Barbara is moving to the West Coast Conference. West Coast Conference has been adding to its ranks after losing Gonzaga, and they're the third school to join them here recently, the last few years here.
Yeah, Seattle is one of them, right? Mm-hmm. And UC Santa Barbara, the other.
UC San Diego.
Yeah, UC San Diego. So, yeah, the Big West and West Coast Conference are kind of with the demise of the WAC, and they're some from the WAC are going to the West Coast, Seattle's one of those. Utah Valley's going to the Big West. The Big West and West Coast Conference may kind of be battling for who's that third best, Western basketball conference. Because it was pretty clear, the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga, with St. Mary's, that was a respectable basketball conference. And they were, you had the Pac-12, you had the Mountain West, and West Coast Conference. But now with Gonzaga leaving, St. Mary's losing Randy Bennett.
Yeah.
That is a conference that is kind of in free fall.
And there were rumors that St. Mary's was going to come and follow Gonzaga as a basketball-only institution. But if that was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now.
Yeah.
But you're right, losing Randy Bennett, there's some uncertainty in their future. But West Coast Conference trying to shore up their conference in case other things happen.
They're trying to survive. They're trying to survive. We do need to take one more break. We'll wrap things up for the show. Coming up next here on the Full Court Press.
Birdie's Golf Lounge is now open. 650 North, 870 West in Logan. Top of the line, launch monitors, 3 internal cameras. It provides the most accurate readings for every part of your game. I also have leagues and competitions with national and local prizes. They have memberships available. Hourly public bookings are also an option. Through April 30th, early birdies, pricing of $129 a month with no monthly contract. Before opening, it's usually $259 a month. So big savings if you become a member now through April 30th.
Yeah, great. I got to check it out. I think my brother was seeing that like during the winter or something like that. I don't think he mentioned it by name, but it's lining up. So, hey, there's this new place opening up. And it's like, there we go. That's the place. We got to go there and try it. Again, got to see if I can fix my own golf swing or if I'll just break the computer being like, yeah, just stop playing golf. So, well, as we wrap up the show, I want to mention the Utah Mammoth playoffs. Cue the Chimora line. Playoffs?
Yeah.
But actually, the Utah Mammoth, we talked yesterday about how there was a specific scenario they needed. They had to win in regulation against the Predators. Right? Yeah, Nashville Predators.
Yep.
And then the Anaheim Ducks had to beat the San Jose Sharks. Technically, the Mammoth had to win in regulation against them. An overtime win wouldn't have clinched a playoff spot. But that very thing ended up happening. And I was watching it last night, and it ended up kind of being easy sailing for the Utah Mammoth. They won, I believe, 4-1. They just kept gradually building their lead. They were up 4-0 in the third period. Nashville did pull one back in the end, but Utah just cruising to that win. Of course, then at that point, they didn't know for sure if they were going to get that because Anaheim and San Jose were still playing, although at the time the final buzzer sounded in Utah, Anaheim was already up 3-0 on the Sharks. So it was I think going into the second or third period. Of course, me and my brother then flipped the channel to watch the Ducks beat the Sharks eventually by a score of 6-1.
Oh, wow.
So
left no doubt.
The two things that Utah needed to happen, the one that they could control, they control that and took care of business. And then got a helpful hand from the Ducks as well. So the Utah Mammoth, for the first time in franchise history and in their second season in the NHL, they are headed to the playoffs.
Headed to the playoffs, and some of the early reports on ticket sales are like they're way expensive.
Yeah, like $140 for the nosebleeds.
Excited to go and watch them. Could cost you a pretty penny to go, but super exciting to see what they've done. On the flip side, you have another game going on tonight, Utah Jazz and Memphis Grizzlies. It is the tankathon of all tankathons. It's the Tankathon Super Bowl tonight. Memphis has, I think I saw something, Memphis has $128 million of their payroll on the bench and unavailable for tonight.
Sheesh.
Utah probably has something close, maybe not quite to the same degree.
Well, with Jaren Jackson Jr., with Lauri Markkanen, that's like $90 million on the bench right there.
A lot of money on the bench just in street clothes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
A lot of 10-day contracts, a lot of G League guys, two-way players.
The Utah Jazz and the Memphis Grizzlies have lost a combined 16 consecutive games. Memphis is on a 6-game losing streak. The Jazz are on a 10-game losing streak. If you extend that to the last 20 games for these respective teams, they are 1-19. The Jazz being 0-10, and the Grizzlies are 1-9 in their last 10 games. The Jazz are in the 4 spot. They're tied with Sacramento, but I think with tiebreakers they would stay in that 4 spot, and that guarantees they can't lose their pick. Memphis is 6th, and they want to. And of course, I actually don't think they can get better than that, but like.
There are significant percentage advantages here for both teams to lose. Like, this game is important for both franchises to improve their chances in the draft lottery.
Yeah, mostly because they don't want to, Dallas is tied with them, so they want to stay ahead of Dallas in that 6th spot as opposed to maybe dropping to 7. And yeah, Utah, they definitely don't want to win in this case.
No.
Because, again, they could drop to 5 and have that 0.6% chance, or because Adam Silver's probably putting his thumb on the scale, 100% chance of falling all the way to 9. So,
Utah wants to stay ahead of Sacramento. Memphis wants to get ahead of Dallas.
Yeah.
And both want to improve their chances for the draft lottery.
Before we close out the show, I want to get to a couple of texts I forgot to get to. 5338, I have to credit this because we're talking about the Conference Realignment Expansion show name. Saying in the case of the old Pac-12, you could call it the Conference Implosion and Contraction show. And then 2603 saying, what seed is most likely for the Mammoth? I don't know enough about the playoff system to answer that question, unfortunately.
We'll get into it next week.
Yeah, that'll be it for us today. We'll talk to you next week.